Hey, welcome back to the LeaderLink podcast. This is your host, Charles Heasley. We're excited to start our first mini-series, and this is going to be on some essential leadership skills that aren't really taught or encouraged or practiced, and they cause some issues, I think, in the workplace. Gallup just released their new State of the Workplace, and congratulations, United States, we're holding steady at only 31% of employees actively engaged in work. And it made me think, I wonder how many of those disengaged employees were once engaged, but they felt like they weren't heard, that they weren't listened to, people didn't care about their opinions. And it made me think back, when I was in law enforcement as a sergeant, I had, at the time he was an assistant chief, and I had been tasked with taking on mental health in a part-time role. And so one of the things is we wanted to create this new project that was going to require all sorts of support from the chain of command. And he basically said, all right, put this thing together and we'll have a meeting and you can present it to us. So I did all this research and I put together this presentation I was super proud of. And everyone from the chain of command was there except for the chief. And they listened and they asked questions and they wanted to know more about the experience and what it would be like and what it would cost and all those things. Now, the answer ultimately was no, or no for now, but I felt okay about it. I was okay, well, even though the answer is no, at least somebody took the time to listen to my ideas. It also made me think of another experience that I had where I walked into my boss's office and I'm asking him a pretty important question. And he's sitting at the computer and he's just typing away. And he doesn't look at me, he doesn't acknowledge me. He waits until the very end of the time to look up at me and then respond. And I felt like I wasn't heard at all. And like what I was there to talk about was just so completely unimportant that I almost felt diminished. Like, what am I doing here? Why aren't we able to have a conversation? That experience actually changed me for what I hope would be the better, because whenever somebody would come to my office or reach out to me on the phone or in the workplace, on the street, wherever, I did my absolute best to minimize the distractions and really make them feel heard and understood. Even if I couldn't do everything that they needed me to do, at least I would listen. The message today is essentially that being able to actively listen is a true gift for the people you lead, for your direct reports. Active listening is much more than listening. It involves processing what the people are saying, what the person is saying, without necessarily coming up with a response. At the time, we're truly trying to understand what it is they're saying. And it doesn't just have to do with the words that they use. It has to do with the emotion behind the words. It has to do with the intent of what they're trying to say. How do they feel about what they're saying? So there's different kinds of levels of listening. And the one I described with the person who was on their computer, didn't even look up at me, that's pretty much the entry level of listening, and that's fake listening, in which the person is only listening to the words you're using, and sometimes not even that entirely. So fake listening is unfortunately probably more common than it should be in the workplace. But when fake listening is happening, people know. They know that you're not listening. They know you're not hearing them. The second level is selective listening, where people, it's basically just like fake listening. They're listening to the words and pretty much nothing else. And they're hearing what they want to hear. They're hearing for that moment in the conversation where they can jump in and say, I've got a response for that. The third level of listening is content. They're just listening for the content. They will listen to what you have to say and then make a decision on whether or not it's relevant to them, whether or not they have a solution or an answer. And unfortunately, what content listening does is it leaves out some of the other important things. What is the intent behind the conversation? What is the feeling behind the conversation? There's no clarifying questions asked. And oftentimes, if we just stay at this level, it can lead to miscommunications. One of my favorite quotes is by George Bernard Shaw. And it is that the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And if we're only living in the fake, selective, or content levels of listening, the likelihood of miscommunication is so much higher. The next level is empathetic listening. And empathetic listening is basically involving empathy. I'm not just listening to the words you're using, I'm listening to genuinely understand what it is you're trying to get across. I am looking for those nonverbal clues, the facial expressions, body language, whether somebody is actively engaged with you, whether they are closed off or kind of a cold language or stiff body. Active or empathetic listening involves not just listening for the content. We're looking for what is the intent of the conversation, how do you feel about this conversation, and really we start to have much more adequate communication at this level because at least it is an active attempt on the listener's part to help the communicator feel understood. And sometimes this is challenging as a leader because we're busy. That's just a truth of being a leader. You constantly have things going on. But it makes so much difference to those individuals when we take the time to really get to understand and take the time to understand what is truly going on. The final level, synergistic communication, and that is really where communication becomes a genuine two-way street. I'm not necessarily waiting for my turn to speak, which is often what happens, right? Somebody talks to us and we're not fully listening to what they're saying because we're thinking, okay, when is it my turn to jump in and say what I have to say? But in synergistic listening, it is the active attempt to engage in a fruitful two-way conversation where we can pull out the genuine meaning that each person is trying to put forward. So how do we do this? Well, there's a couple of ways. Number one, having a curiosity mindset. When somebody is approaching you with something, if you have this belief that you already know what the outcome of the conversation is going to be, or you know whether or not you're going to be able to help, or you're frustrated with this person because they may come to you with something similar. If we approach conversations with that mindset rather than a curiosity mindset, we're closing the door to that empathetic and synergistic listening. So have the curiosity mindset. Be thinking, okay, what is it about this that I don't know? How would I feel? How would I respond if I happen to be in this person's shoes? Another way we can do that and build on that curiosity is ask questions. Questions are powerful. Questions can be statements or they can be actual questions with a question mark at the end. For example, tell me more is a great question. That seems really important to you. Can you tell me a little bit more about your perspective on that? And the way we respond with our questions matters. Our tone, our body language, all of those things, facial expressions, to communicate to that person, I genuinely care to learn more about what you're saying. Imagine how heard that person will feel if their boss says, I really want to see more from your perspective. Tell me more about what's going on. Ultimately, this leads to a general feeling of being present for that person. Imagine in your mind, you're walking into your boss's office. They're sitting at the computer. You're talking to them. They don't look at you. They're typing away, clearly looking at whatever they're doing. And then you finish and they turn around as if to say, what do you want? What do you need? It's demoralizing. Completely different if you actively attempt to bring that presence. So some general general tips to this. Silence can be your friend as a leader, and silence is critical as a listener. We need to allow the person to fully express what they need to. And sometimes they'll be finished with what they have to say, and it is still okay to remain silent. Silence can help you process what they're saying rather than forcing you to come up with your response as they're talking, which basically lessens the amount you're able to listen. Silence also gives them a chance to process something, because I can't tell you how many times as a leader somebody would come to me with a problem or a challenge or whatever, and just talking it out, they came up with their own solutions, which was beautiful. They didn't actually need me to solve any problem or coach them through it. They were able to solve their problem on their own by coming up with that answer, because I gave them the gift of silence. Second key is paraphrase. There's a wonderful book by Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. I think this is where I got this concept, where he talks about how to paraphrase basically continuously throughout the dialogue to show that you've heard what the person is saying. And in this case, paraphrasing is essentially asking, okay, I heard you say XYZ. Did I get that right? Now, paraphrasing gives them the option to confirm, yep, you heard me correctly, or it gives them the opportunity to clarify or correct your interpretation. Paraphrasing is also great because you can use clarifying questions. Like I said, did I get that right? Or can you tell me more about this specific thing? And when the person is done explaining what they came to talk to you about, giving an overall summary will help. You don't have to hit on every single point, but the points that you think were the most key. Summarize what it is, and then we can go next steps from there. Is this something that we need to coach you on? Is this something that a problem that I need to help you with? Is this XYZ? But we won't know all those things unless we give them the gift of active listening, the gift of curiosity, the gift of questions, and in some cases, even the gift of silence. All right, so your challenge for this week is to find somebody on your team, ask questions, get curious, make them feel heard, and see what kind of impact that has on their productivity, their engagement, but also your relationship with that person. All right, we're going to see you next week on the second essential leadership skill that is often overlooked, and that is the skill of feedback. All right, we'll see you next Tuesday.